The scene begins in the bustling junkyard of Iron City, where Dr. Ito, a cyber surgeon with a knack for finding treasure in the trash, stumbles upon a broken cyborg. Despite looking like it went through a blender, the cyborg's brain is still functioning. Ito, being the good Samaritan or just having way too much free time, takes her home and gives her a complete makeover. When the cyborg wakes up, she's like a newborn fawn, wobbly legs and all, looking at herself in the mirror as if she just realized she got a new hairstyle. But instead of admiring her reflection, she decides to check out the people who brought her back to life, with all the subtlety of an elephant going down the stairs. Ito, ever the worried dad, checks for any defects in her. The cyborg, now called Alita, has only one concern: is there food? Ito, in his infinite wisdom, hands her an orange. As she peels it, she realizes she has no memory of who she is. But don't worry, Ito says her memories will eventually come back, like when you remember where you left your keys. As Ito takes Alita on a tour of Iron City, she is mesmerized by the floating metropolis of Zalem in the sky. Ito, always the cynic, tells her not to get too excited because nobody gets a ticket to that sky-high paradise anytime soon. Alita's attention is drawn to a motorball game on TV, a sport that's basically a mix of roller derby with total destruction. But Ito dismisses it, saying it's not worth watching. Later, while sharing her meal with a stray dog, Alita spots a wanted poster for a serial killer. Enter the Centurion, a giant police robot with all the charm of a bulldozer. Alita, always impulsive, strikes a battle pose, only to be pulled to safety by Hugo, a street-smart kid who clearly read the manual on how not to get crushed by a robot. The dog, however, is still in the line of fire, so Alita rushes to protect it, revealing her hidden skills. Hugo, impressed but not surprised, realizes she's a cyborg. Ito returns, shrugs, and introduces her as the new girl in town. Meanwhile, somewhere in the city, a woman is attacked, and later Alita sees Ito returning home with blood-stained clothes. Suspicious, right? The next morning, after noticing Ito's fresh injury, Alita starts connecting the dots like a true detective. Their patient, a cyborg, casually drops the bomb that he's a victim of body part theft and mentions the serial killer. Ito, trying to sound all-wise, warns Alita to be careful out there. Outside, Alita has a brief but strange encounter with Chirin, a woman who seems way too interested in her. Turns out that Chirin has a history with Ito and points out that Alita's new body used to belong to their deceased daughter. Talk about recycling. Chirin tries to recruit Ito to create motorball champions, promising they could earn enough to buy their way back to Zalem. Ito, however, isn't buying what she's selling and promptly refuses, knowing that tickets to Zalem are as fictional as the galaxy from Star Wars, being just around the corner. During the production of this film, they used performance capture technology to bring the title character to life, just like in Avatar, 2009, directed by James Cameron, who also produced this film. At this point, I couldn't help but think, what would I do if I were Alita? I probably wouldn't dive headfirst into a game of motorball with Hugo and his friends, considering she's still learning how to walk properly. However, when she finds herself in a bar full of bounty hunters, picking a fight and challenging a brute like Gruishka, I think, Alita, this isn't the way. But then again, the bold move of using the dog's blood as war paint was a stroke of genius. Speaking of which, did you know that in the original manga, Alita's full name is Alita 99? And she's much older than she looks, over 300 years old. Gruishka, the giant, decides to show off his artistic skills with his grind cutters. But Alita, clearly not in the mood to be sliced, dodges gracefully. In a dramatic move, he opens a hole in the ground and invites her for a guided tour of his old underground home, where he promises to finish her off. Being the good heroine that she is, Alita accepts the offer and, after a brief exchange of blows and cuts, Gruishka reveals he was saved by none other than Nova, the big puppet master who apparently loves ruining our favorite characters' lives. During the battle, Alita has a flashback of her training with Gelda, where she discovers that Nova is the enemy. Back in the present, Alita uses her remaining arm to pierce Gruishka's eye, clearly a weak spot, before Ito and Hugo show up with the cavalry, or rather, with McTeague and his cyborg dogs, who send Gruishka running with his tail between his legs. After the fight, Ito carries what's left of Alita, and Chirin, always ready to throw a jab, accuses Ito of trying to replace their daughter with Alita. With few options left, Ito decides to merge Alita with the Berserker URM body, causing the body to adjust to her subconscious image. Upon awakening, Alita, now more powerful and excited, thanks Ito and even discovers she can generate plasma with her finger, something everyone would love to do at a Sunday barbecue. Ito, in a fatherly tone, reminds Alita that the body is just a shell, and it's up to her to decide how to use it. During a walk with Hugo, Alita shows off her new abilities, and in a moment of romance, Hugo makes her close her eyes to give her a kiss. Because, clearly, saving the world doesn't stop a brief moment of teenage love. Meanwhile, Nova, still in Vector's body, orders Gruishka to destroy Alita. But upon realizing that Nova controls everything, Vector decides to create his own plan. He invites Hugo for a drink, because nothing beats a deep chat after almost dying. And upon discovering that Hugo is working hard to save up money to go to Zalem, he suggests that maybe Alita is a distraction. The next day, Hugo reveals to Alita that after meeting her, he's reconsidering going to Zalem. But she, always selfless, insists on helping him, even offering her URM heart as a spare part for the journey. However, Hugo refuses, suggesting that Alita enter Motorball and become the champion. As Alita prepares for the game, little does she know that Vector hired a group of hunters to take her out. The action goes wild as Alita enters the Motorball arena. Even being an experienced heroine, she didn't count on her opponents being bounty hunters in disguise. As if she were in a mix of Tron and Mad Max, Alita goes on a rampage, using the game ball as a true lethal weapon, sending her enemies flying and heads rolling. But amidst the chaos, Hugo calls for help, and Alita, always the savior, rushes to protect him, only to discover that he's being accused of murder. When confronting Zapan, she gets even more involved, and in the middle of the mess, Hugo is severely injured. The situation only gets worse when Nova, showing that he has no heart, manipulates Hugo's death in a cruel way, leaving Alita devastated. In the following months, she becomes a fierce competitor in the Motorball Champions League, but even with the chance to go to Zalem, she still grieves for Hugo while Nova, of course, continues to watch everything from afar like a true movie villain. The director of this film, Robert Rodriguez, shot the Motorball fight scene in a real arena built in Austin, Texas. I, for one, wouldn't have rushed to save Hugo in the tube that connects Zalem to Iron City, because it was clearly an obvious trap, but I would have been much more cautious in trusting Vector, who seems to have cheater written on his forehead. I found it interesting how Alita's story mixes elements of futuristic action with touches of tragic romance, which reminded me a bit of Blade Runner. If you could access a memory of your forgotten past like Alita, which moment would you choose to relive and why? Leave it in the comments, and I'll see you next time.
And I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect.